The production of this program is made possible thanks to the support of the following and viewers like you. Little did we know how fast the free market would slap the electric vehicle mandate back to reality, while Canadian taxpayers continue to subsidize green fantasies, says Adam Pankratz, a lecturer at the University of British Columbia's Sauder School of Business. The slap he refers to is the plummeting sales of electric vehicles in North America. Pankratz says the signs emerged in September 2023 when Volkswagen announced it was cutting EV output. Reason? Low demand. And in November, Ford announced it would be scaling back EV battery production due to lackluster demand. As the new year emerged, EV news stayed on the same trend line. Pankratz said General Motors, Mercedes-Benz, and even Tesla warned EV sales were projected to be significantly lower than predicted. Then add in Hertz's decision to sell off most of its AEVs, and the message is clear. The market is cool on electric cars. I invited Adam Pankratz to join me for a conversation that matters on the trajectory of electric vehicle sales and what that says about government directives versus market forces. Adam, welcome.
Well, I'm happy to be here, Stu. Thank you.
Well, happy in one sense because we get to share what is the cold hard reality of how markets work versus what we're being told to do by people who aren't really in the marketplace. They've got a vision of what they would like to see happen. How apparent is it to you that government policy is out of sync with drivers' considerations and desires about what they want in the way of a vehicle?
Well, I think what we've seen happen is governments have this vision of a no emissions green future. And like I've said many times, that's a nice future. Like, I like the look of that too, no environmental impact. Wouldn't that be nice? But the question has always been, what is that going to look like to get there? How do we move from an addiction on fossil fuels into an electrification future or a lower emissions future? And it seems that no one in the government ever really thought about what that was going to look like. And so electric vehicles were going to be a big part of that, cutting emissions, not using internal combustion engines anymore. But they never really considered what that would look like for the consumer. And what is that going to look like in terms of how do we recharge these things? Does the grid have enough capacity? What do these electric vehicles cost consumers? Is it actually worth it? And those basic questions of free market dynamics were never taken seriously, I don't think, with everyone thinking that consumers would just jump on the green bandwagon as much as the government proponents of these programs wanted them to.
You know, if we go back over the history of the electric car, there are there were early indications that maybe this was actually going to go somewhere. I don't know if you ever saw that fantastic movie, Who Killed the Electric Car? But it was about in the late 1990s in the United States, they were moving towards mandating that vehicles go electric. This was under the Clinton administration. And Toyota paid close attention. And they developed the Prius. And sales took off. Even though Prius is a hybrid vehicle, sales took off. But the American automakers sort of fought back against it and had that mandate removed, and so they didn't go there. But it looked like there was a market. Enter Elon Musk, and Tesla sales start going, and look at the value. So there was this sense that, yeah, consumers were going to move in that direction. But consumers are not so easy to predict their behavior.
Well, and some consumers did, though, right? I mean, Tesla has been, it's not maybe hit the production value that its market cap suggests it should be, but it's selling a lot of cars. And there is a market for those electric vehicles. But I think we're seeing, too, a little bit with Tesla specifically, that customers didn't necessarily want electric vehicles, they wanted a Tesla. And there was a misunderstanding of that a little bit, that Tesla was this extra special electric car, but just the sort of regular person out there getting an electric vehicle at massive, massive scale where everyone was going to transition. That was just never a reality from a consumer dynamic point of view and from, frankly, an electrification grid point of view. And this is something that, you know, it seems such a basic thing, but that electrification was going to require lots of electricity that we don't have. And if you are going to make that purchase decision, it's going to cost you as a consumer a lot of money. And as your demand for electricity rises, so is the price of electricity. And these dynamics are complicated. They take a long time to work out. And so, you know, the transition to electric vehicles, sure, it can happen, and I wouldn't be surprised if it does, but I think we're talking about decades at least here.
So do you think that the government made a mistake then in saying, no, you got to be totally electric by this date? And we saw aggressive targets in Europe, and we see like the same discussions happening here. And in doing so, like they're forcing a market rather than allowing the market to evolve.
The government certainly has a right to encourage industries it wants and to sort of discourage ones it doesn't. When it starts mandating, though, that directly, that's where we really run into problems, right? I mean, you know, and the government does this all the time. They talk about it when they like to say, well, it's not our business to get involved in business when they don't like it. Recently, Jonathan Wilkinson made those comments with regards to LNG. However, you're subsidizing $40 billion worth of electric batteries in Ontario for electric car manufacturing. So the government, you know, will decide to put money or to encourage certain industries. The mandates are a problem, though, because the government, at the end of the day, can encourage or nudge and create policy that attracts business that it wants, but it can't force the market in a direction the market doesn't want to go, and not with something as fundamental as our energy use or cars, which everyone has, right? Or many people have, I should say. And that is, these are major purchases for consumers. And when we're looking at electric vehicles, which are now getting a lot of bad press in terms of what do you do when their battery breaks down? The vehicle seems almost to be worthless, as we saw with Hertz, because it's such a massive cost to replace the battery. Consumers are taking notice, and they're saying, okay, hang on, this might be an interesting vehicle to buy at some point, but that point for me is not right now. And in that environment, you know, it's very, very difficult for the government to make a wholesale change and turn us over to electric vehicles so fast.
The production of this program is made possible thanks to the support of the following and viewers like you. So how does government then go about creating a realistic environment to encourage industry to move in that direction, but also get the consumers to come along and say, yeah, that works for me as well?
Well, at the end of the day, you know, these are large purchases for consumers, and the cost, reliability, and ease of use are going to be factors that consumers care about. And they're not, when you see in the summer charging stations backed up for 2 hours, when you see electric vehicle resale plummeting, when you see that the auto manufacturers themselves, you know, are not making money on these vehicles and aren't going to be able to keep the costs, so it would seem, even where they are right now, consumers, you know, are not stupid, and certainly not as a whole, as a market, right? The market recognizes that something is amiss here with electric vehicles, and they're saying, well, okay, I'm going to delay this purchase decision until I'm more confident that when I'm investing my tens of thousands of dollars in this vehicle for me and my family, that I know that it's going to behave somewhat like an internal combustion engine where I have more comfort. Right? And that is a hard thing to have move. And again, the automakers as well, like you mentioned in your intro, they're not making money on these vehicles. So what does the future look like where the government is forcing us in a certain direction? And this is putting us aside from the fact that our grid can't handle this anyway. Right? Let's put that aside for 1 second. This is just the pure economics of the electric vehicle. Will they get better? Probably, but we're not there yet. And this is the problem with the government mandates, is that it's trying to drive a square peg through a round hole time-wise, and it's not working, and the market is saying no thank you.
So would you suggest that the government would be better, I guess, invested in expanding out infrastructure that's going to support the electrification of vehicles and everything else? Because they're also encouraging heat pumps and you name it, that is going to be driven by clean, with fingers crossed, renewable energy. Do you think that that's really where they should be putting their money, rather than saying, trying to mandate that buy cars, electric cars, oh, and we're going to help build the batteries, or we're going to invest in the batteries?
Well, I think that the government needs to, at least in Canada, needs to be looking more at where is the money going to come from for the programs that we want, right? And so if you look at Norway, right, they've done a great job of electrifying their vehicle charging network and encouraging green solutions for many Norwegians, and they've done that on the back of drilling for oil. And Canada has massive oil, natural gas, which everyone is talking about nowadays, yet we have decided to basically ignore the great resources and money generating capabilities that our economy could have, which would then turn into revenues, royalties, and taxes for the government to develop an electric charging network, to provide maybe more incentives for Canadians to buy electric vehicles, all of the things that the government, has sort of begun to do right now, but which it doesn't really have the money to do, and is questionable anyway as to whether the market is going to react.
Well, you touch on a very interesting point there. This federal government has clearly stated we are turning our back on fossil fuel sector. Despite the abundance of natural resources that exist here in Canada, this federal government has made a decision. We're not going in that direction. I mean, just take a look. A couple weeks ago, before the recording of this, the Prime Minister of Greece was in Canada asking for LNG as a fuel source, but also to help them to reduce their own emissions. And our Prime Minister said, nope, we're not going to do it, because that will increase our emissions. So how do we get to where we want to if we're not, to your point, utilizing the resources and the potential revenue that we need to make the shift here?
I think when looking at where we see the gas and oil markets going currently, I think there's a good chance we're going to look back at the 2000s and 2010s as perhaps the largest missed economic opportunity that Canada has ever seen, because of our inability to build pipelines to get our resources to the world and to our allies who are screaming at us, please send us your gas, right? Particularly the European scenario. It's not just Greece, it's been Germany, and frankly all of Europe need gas now that they're basically cut off from Russian supply. So that, I think, is a cataclysmic missed opportunity in terms of the Canadian economy. But you can walk and chew gum at the same time. And Canada has decided that, well, we're just going to stop walking and developing the resources that we have, which, by the way, also, we're talking about oil and gas right now, but electrification of all these vehicles also requires a huge amount of copper, an enormous amount of lithium, cobalt. There's all kinds of minerals that go into electric vehicles that we do not have enough of right now. Mm-hmm. And as we're having this conversation, the price of copper just went above $4 a pound. It seems set to keep running if you look at any of the analysis that any of the big banks or commodity houses have out there. And these are, again, projects that Canada is, if not actively discouraging, certainly not sending a message to the international investment community that, hey, come to Canada. We have the resources and the minerals that the world needs, both for the energy transition and for the electrification that is to follow after that.
The production of this program is made possible thanks to the support of the following and viewers like you. Well, we have a tremendous cache of critical minerals that are essential in this transition. but we're nowhere close to being able to develop them at the moment because we're dragging our feet on just the approval process, let alone how long it then takes to build out. Are we also sending a signal that says investing in Canada may not be the best place to put your money?
I think on multiple fronts, the government has done that. Certainly in the oil and gas sector, for sure. I mean, that's where we had massive investments. We're very fortunate that we have LNG Canada, a $40 billion project that is ultimately going to go through. But we have not done, in my view, a good job of bringing that investment in. There's been a slow decline of it. And, that money will go elsewhere because there is gas in other places. You look at the United States, and I'm not saying we need to be quite on the level of the United States, lest anyone accuse me of that. But in the time that we have not even yet completed one LNG export terminal, the United States last year completed 9. Like, they reacted to the opportunity provided by the surge in natural gas prices and the clear direction that Europe is going to need gas from somewhere. They did something about it. We decided that there was no business case for LNG. This is a problem, and that is money that is leaving Canada that's not going to Canadians and to the government's own ideological priorities that could be spent on projects that they want to spend it on in order to electrify or green the economy.
You're not painting an attractive picture right at the moment, and it causes me concern because I'm worried, and this is I believe it's a legitimate concern. As we've been going down this path and starting to abandon some of the energy resources that we have had, that we've relied on, and we start to undermine what is potential energy security, at some point, the impact on the market, which we're already seeing in the drop of EV sales, is that people are going to then say, you know what, I'm going to abandon my commitment to the environment. You haven't. I mean, you started off by saying, yeah, I think net zero is a laudable goal and I want to live in that world too. But if we don't manage this correctly, I'm worried that we're going to get stranded between what we don't have in the new and what we're no longer able to meet our needs with the old, driving the cost up even further, which then drives an even bigger wedge into our commitment to pay attention to reducing, carbon emissions into the atmosphere.
Well, what you're saying is happening, not in Canada, because we're lucky that we have a lot of our own resources, but that is happening as we speak in Germany and in Europe, where they have restarted coal plants, where they're digging for coal in northwestern Germany, where they have abundant coal resources, by the way. That is where the energy is coming from, right? So if the energy isn't coming from natural gas, if it's not coming from hydro, I mean, BC, we're very lucky with that specifically. But if it's not coming from somewhere, from a reliable source, it's going to come from the least expensive option that our allies have, and in Europe's case, that's coal. Well, that's not good for the environment, right? We're not making a positive impact because of our refusal to acknowledge the reality of the transition and how difficult it's going to be, and the fact that ordinary people are going to get hurt by the cost of very expensive energy. And the way they're going to react is back to where we started this conversation, is by not purchasing the more expensive electric vehicle, by not spending more on electricity, by not investing in a vehicle where recent figures out of UBC, depends which province you take, but that you have to drive these vehicles around about 150,000 kilometers before the impact and the both environmentally and financially makes sense to buy an EV. Well, people are not going to do this unless it is clear that it's the better option, and right now that is far from the case.
Well, at 150,000 kilometers, and probably the average family maybe 25,000 kilometers a year, you're asking somebody to hang onto that vehicle for a very long time, and that is not the buying habits of the average car owner.
No, well, that's the problem. And even, I think that was based on 64 kilometers driven a day, right? So that will vary from family to family. Certainly for me, I'm fortunate I don't drive that far. It would be around well over 10 years before I would hit that if I were to purchase a new electric vehicle. Consumers consider all of these things. Again, as a market, the consumer is very, very intelligent and very, very efficient. And the government, unless it just decides that it's going to outright ban electric cars, is not going to see electric vehicles increase. And I think that would be such an extreme position to take that would cause many other problems along with it and hurt the people that the government claims to most care about.
The production of this program is made possible thanks to the support of the following and viewers like you. But I look at what's happening as far as commitment to electric vehicles. We saw a rise, and now it's tapering off. If we take a look at the commitment to carbon taxes and environmental mitigation, we're seeing that starting to sag too. So is what's happening with EV sales indicative of where the electorate is going? And will this then, our next election, really be about where are we going to go in our measures to move towards net zero?
I don't think it's about net zero per se, but it's about the consequences and the reality of that move, which is that it's going to cost a lot of money. It's going to cost a lot of money. We've invested, the numbers are consistently going up, but I think it's around $4 to $5 trillion in the energy transition so far. Fossil fuels still account for 82% of our energy consumption. Okay, so this is a seriously expensive endeavor that's going to take a seriously long time. And what Canadians right now in our cost of living crisis are saying to the government loud and clear is we can't afford this. And our priority right now is being able to pay our rent, feed our family, get our kids to school. It's not finding the lowest emissions way to do that. And if you look, Canadians are broadly supportive, as I said off the top. Right. They're broadly supportive of the transition to a cleaner economy. Who wouldn't be? But the cost can't be exorbitant. People simply cannot afford it. And that's where the market jumps up and says to the government, time out. This can't happen on your timeline. It's going to happen on the timelines of Canadians and North Americans and Europeans as a whole.
So I think that what's happening with EV sales is a barometer of where Canadians are looking at saying, yes, I'm committed, but not with my dollars.
Well, and that's exactly it. And the automobile manufacturers are exceptionally well placed, obviously, to see what is this costing us to produce these? Are we getting the return on our investment? They respond quickly. They don't have the luxury of a government to drag their feet or to drag this out. They need to react to what's going on right now and what the reality of the market is right now. And that's where, the government, if they have a longer term plan, they have the luxury to plan that out, right? But it's not going to be by 2035 or 2040. We're not advancing that fast. 2035 sounds a long way away. Well, it's only, we're closer to 2040 than we are to 2010, I think, at this point. So let's be careful about that. I think my numbers are a little wrong on that, but we're in the middle. Okay, that
we're
and 20
in the middle.
Doesn't seem that it seems a long way away out in the future, but 2010 isn't that long ago. And we look at the progress we've made. Do we think if we keep that going, we're going to be anywhere near what we're being told we need to accomplish by 2035 or 2040? No, we're not. And there needs to be just a realism from the government to say, this is the long-term goal, but we recognize how difficult it's going to be. We recognize how expensive it's going to be. And we're going to build out that infrastructure and encourage the right programs in order to make this happen.
On realistic timelines.
On realistic timelines.
And I think that is the sort of the magic balancing act. Like, do we find the right timeline? Vaclav Semel says we're on the wrong timeline right now. He agrees with you.
Well, but he is his book is fantastic. By the way, the name of it escapes me right now. But he lays out
How the world really works.
How the world really works. He lays out exactly what requirements are for the energy that we in the modern world consume and need in order to maintain our standard of life. Again, the short timeline version of this is we deindustrialize and our standard of living craters. But if we expect that Canadians or anybody is going to accept that, the government is living in a dream world, what is the way to make this work is longer timelines, more realism, less ideology, and talking to people like Václav Smil and saying, what is really going to happen here? How long is this really going to take? And not setting some arbitrary timeline that sounds good, that the government of the day is probably not going to be accountable to anyway, because they're going to be out of power by the time that date comes around. And in the meantime, they've hurt Canadians and they've hurt families who can't afford this transition and want the Canadian economy to do better and don't want their pocketbooks to be hit to address some fantasy of a green dream.
Thank you for your perspective. I appreciate it. Thanks for your time.